It started with a simple stack of papers on the entry table. Nothing dramatic, no slammed doors or raised voices, just cruise documents with every family member's name printed neatly, except mine. For a moment, I didn't even process what I was holding. My brain tried to explain it away. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they hadn't booked my ticket yet. But deep down, clarity spread through me like cold water. This wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. I looked at my parents, waiting for someone to say it out loud. Instead, silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. My mother stepped forward with a weak smile, reaching for me as though the gesture could erase years of dismissal. "Honey, you're overreacting. Let's sit down." But her words felt rehearsed, the kind of response you use when you've been caught. I placed the papers back on the table, as calmly as if they were nothing more than junk mail. No shouting. No begging for answers. Just a quiet, deliberate decision, forming inside me. I picked up my overnight bag, walked to the door, and stepped into the evening air. Behind me, I heard my mother call my name, but for the first time in 28 years, I didn't turn back. The walk to my apartment felt surreal. I replayed every family gathering in my head. Holidays, vacations, birthdays, and suddenly patterns emerged like hidden writing under a black light. I wasn't simply forgotten, I was excluded. Strategically, repeatedly, purposefully. By the time I unlocked my door, the weight of those cruise tickets had already transformed into something much bigger. Undeniable proof. In the quiet of my apartment, I pulled out old photo albums and shoeboxes of mementos, scattering them across the carpet. The evidence was there all along. I had just refused to see it. Pictures of Christmas morning, where my siblings unwrapped expensive gifts while I held a clearance scarf. Vacation photos in Yellowstone, Disney, Napa, all trips I was told I couldn't attend for one reason or another. The excuses replayed in my head: someone needs to water the plants. Your internship is that week. You wouldn't enjoy it anyway. The justifications that once seemed reasonable now revealed themselves for what they really were: lies crafted to keep me out. But it wasn't just the memories that hurt. It was the math. Pulling up my budgeting spreadsheet, I traced every dollar I'd given my parents over the years for medical bills, car repairs, emergencies. Nearly $40,000 siphoned from my hard work, money they accepted even while planning vacations without me. The cruelest detail: the last payment I'd given them, $2,800, was supposed to be my Lake Tahoe trip fund. I canceled that dream, believing I was saving the family, when in truth, they were already holding cruise tickets. Tickets they never intended to include me in. That night, staring at the documents again, the truth crystallized. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't forgetfulness. It was a pattern of exclusion so deliberate, it stretched across my entire life. And now, with the cruise tickets in my hands, I couldn't unsee it. Once the shock of the cruise documents settled, the realization hit me with brutal clarity. This wasn't the first time. It was the culmination of a lifetime of being left out, passed over, and treated as if I were only useful when they needed something. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't being dramatic. The evidence had been building for 28 years, and now the pattern was impossible to ignore. I opened the first photo album and froze on Christmas 2018. There was Harper, glowing with excitement as she unwrapped a brand new MacBook. Cody, grinning beside his first car keys, a used but still valuable vehicle. And me? I held up a scarf from Target, the price tag still attached, $19.99. My smile looked genuine in that snapshot, but I remembered convincing myself back then that my parents had done their best. That lie shattered under the weight of hindsight. They could afford the big gifts. They simply chose not to give them to me. I kept flipping through the albums, each page revealing another wound I hadn't allowed myself to acknowledge. Yellowstone, Disney World, Napa Valley, trips I'd been told I couldn't join. At the time, the excuses seemed logical. Someone had to water the plants. My internship was too important, or they thought I wouldn't enjoy it. But looking back now, every excuse was a carefully constructed wall, meant to keep me out of the picture, both literally and figuratively. The floodgates opened wider as childhood memories resurfaced. I was 7 when I asked for piano lessons. After watching Harper practice with her vocal coach, my mother had smiled. shaking her head. We can't afford 2 kids in music lessons, Rain. Maybe next year, but next year never came. 6 months later, Cody got guitar lessons. At 13, I begged to join the 8th-grade science trip to the Oregon coast. My father told me $400 was too much right now, patting my shoulder with false sympathy. Weeks later, he and Cody went on a camping trip that cost twice as much. By the time I reached my college years, the favoritism had calcified into routine. While Harper and Cody had their rent and car insurance paid, I juggled 3 jobs just to stay afloat. My mother's justification was always the same. You're just so independent, honey. We know you can handle it. At the time, I mistook it for praise. Now I saw it for what it really was: a convenient excuse to neglect me while showering my siblings with support. The truth bloomed inside me, like a bruise spreading under the skin. Every memory I revisited confirmed what I had always felt, but never dared to say. I was the outsider in my own family, the one who didn't matter enough to include, except when my wallet was needed. Sitting cross-legged on the carpet, surrounded by albums, shoe boxes, and my laptop, I realized something chilling. My family hadn't just excluded me from a cruise. They had been excluding me my entire life. The cruise wasn't the beginning. It was simply the final straw that made me see the truth I had buried for decades. Once the emotional fog cleared, I turned to something I knew couldn't lie: numbers. Emotions can be twisted, memories doubted, but money leaves a trail. So I opened my laptop and scrolled through my monthly budget spreadsheets, a habit I'd built to track every extra freelance project, every skipped lunch, every dollar I tried to save. Highlighted rows stared back at me like accusations. $450 in April. Dad's insulin costs went up. $1,400 in June. Hospital copay for Dad's diabetes. $800 in August. Mom's car needs transmission work. $2,800 just last month, family emergency fund. That last one stung worst of all: my Lake Tahoe money. The trip I'd been dreaming of for years. I canceled it because my family insisted they needed me, only to find they were already holding cruise tickets. Tickets that had been purchased months earlier, with everyone's name but mine. My stomach knotted as I kept scrolling. This wasn't a one-time sacrifice. This was a financial pattern that stretched across a decade. Nearly $40,000 had left my hands and gone straight into theirs. It was a small fortune, money that could have built my savings, paid off debts, or funded experiences I kept postponing. Instead, it became a bottomless pit labeled family emergencies. I remembered the countless times I transferred money late at night, convincing myself I was being a good daughter. Rent due, I covered it. Repairs, I paid them. Medical costs, I didn't hesitate. But when I needed help, when my own car broke down, when I considered grad school, when I wanted something as simple as a vacation, they never stepped forward. The truth was undeniable. I was the financial safety net, not a daughter equally cared for. It hurt more than I expected. Money wasn't just currency. It was time, effort, and sacrifice. Every dollar represented weekends I spent hunched over freelance projects instead of relaxing. It represented saying no to outings with friends, skipping self-care, and tightening my own budget so my family could live more comfortably. And yet, despite giving so much, I was still excluded from the very joys my money made possible. The cruelty wasn't in the requests. It was in the deception. They asked for my Tahoe money while already planning a luxury cruise. They told me there wasn't enough for piano lessons, for science trips, for equal treatment, yet found plenty for my siblings' hobbies, cars, and vacations. It wasn't financial struggle. It was financial choice. And I was always the one chosen to sacrifice. For years, I believed their words. You're independent. You can handle it. But sitting in front of those spreadsheets, I finally saw the truth. I wasn't independent by nature. I was forced into independence because my family depended on me. That night, I closed my laptop slowly, as though sealing away a crime scene. The numbers didn't just reveal exploitation. They revealed betrayal, carefully masked as love. Numbers exposed the financial betrayal, but the real sting came from the memories. Once I allowed myself to revisit them, they surfaced fast and unrelenting. like waves I could no longer hold back. Each memory was a small wound I had ignored at the time, but together they painted a portrait of a child quietly pushed aside. I was 7 when I first felt it. Harper sat at the piano with her private coach, fingers stumbling through scales, while I lingered at the kitchen table. I had asked my mother if I could take lessons too. Her answer was simple. We can't afford 2 kids in music lessons. Rain, maybe next year. My heart sank, but I believed her. I waited for next year. It never came. 6 months later, Cody started guitar lessons, strumming proudly in the living room. At 13, the pattern deepened. My classmates buzzed with excitement about the 8th grade science trip to the Oregon coast. I begged to. My father placed a heavy hand on my shoulder and said, $400 is too much right now, sweetheart. I nodded, swallowing disappointment. 3 weeks later, he surprised Cody with a father-son camping trip that cost nearly double. The unfairness burned, but I told myself they deserved it more. High school didn't change much. Harper got a car at 16, used but dependable. Cody followed 2 years later, his insurance fully covered. I graduated with honors, working part-time jobs to pay for bus fare. My mother's explanation was always the same. You're so independent. You don't need help. At the time, I took it as praise. Now I saw it as dismissal disguised as flattery. Even holidays carried the same script. Christmas mornings, where Harper unwrapped high-end gadgets and Cody flaunted expensive gear, while I smiled over bargain bin gifts. My joy wasn't fake. I wanted to believe it was all they could manage. But the truth was, they had money. They just didn't spend it on me. College years were the final confirmation. While my siblings had rent and tuition support, I juggled 3 jobs just to stay enrolled. I still remember sobbing at my kitchen table, exhausted from overnight shifts, only to hear my mother say, "We're so proud of how independent you are. You don't need our help." The words cut deeper than any insult. Independence wasn't a gift they gave me. It was survival forced upon me by their choices. Looking back, the moments weren't isolated. They formed a consistent pattern. Harper and Cody were nurtured, supported, celebrated. I was sidelined, told to fend for myself, praised for handling neglect. What once felt like unfortunate coincidences now screamed deliberate exclusion. The cruelest part? I believed their story for nearly 3 decades. I believed I was too sensitive, too needy, too dramatic, but the truth was always there, buried in childhood moments, where I learned the unspoken rule. In this family, rain doesn't come first. Rain barely counts at all. The moment I said it for the first time, I barely recognized my own voice. My phone buzzed with yet another request. Harper's panicked voice spilling through the receiver. The babysitter had canceled, and she needed me to take the kids. She was still on the cruise, laughing in luxury, while I sat at home, piecing my life together. For years, I would have dropped everything, rearranged my schedule, sacrificed my plans. But this time, the words came out steady and final. I'm unavailable. The silence on the other end was almost satisfying. Harper stammered, searching for leverage. But I repeated it calmer, firmer. I'm unavailable. Then I hung up. It didn't stop there. Days later, Cody called. His car had broken down, and he needed $800 for repairs. His tone carried the same entitlement I'd grown up with. Like my money was community property. Like helping him was simply what I did. I'll pay you back next month, he promised. A phrase I'd heard more times than I could count. But I didn't hesitate. I'm unavailable, I said, and hung up before he could argue. The final test came from my mother. Her voice was trembling, soaked in desperation. She explained how the mortgage was due, how Dad's medical bills had climbed higher than expected, how they were at risk of losing the house. The plea was familiar, almost rehearsed, but this time, I listened differently. I imagined the spreadsheets. I remembered the cruise tickets. I saw the years of sacrifices, vacations canceled, dreams postponed, all while they lived comfortably off my contributions. When she finished, there was a pause. My old self would have caved, soothed her fears, wired the money immediately, but the new me stayed quiet, until finally I spoke. I'm unavailable. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd felt before. Then came the words that confirmed everything. What are we supposed to do without you? It wasn't just a question, it was an admission. They hadn't seen me as a daughter, but as their lifeline, their backup plan, their ATM. My absence wasn't breaking the family apart. It was exposing how much they had leaned on me, while giving nothing in return. I ended the call and sat in my apartment, my chest rising and falling with a strange new rhythm. It wasn't fear. It wasn't guilt. It was freedom. Saying no hadn't destroyed me. It had saved me. Each repetition of "I'm unavailable" built a wall I'd never had before, a boundary strong enough to hold back years of manipulation. It wasn't easy. The calls kept coming. The guilt trips arrived by voicemail, and relatives I barely knew were suddenly recruited to convince me I was overreacting. But the words gave me power. 3 syllables, firm and unwavering. I was no longer the reliable fixer, the financial crutch, the forgotten sibling who still showed up when asked. I was unavailable. And for the first time in my life, I chose myself. At first, it was just my mother's tearful calls and Cody's angry demands. But soon the entire extended family was recruited. Suddenly, people I barely spoke to, Aunt Patricia, Cousin Megan, even Uncle Jerry, were leaving voicemails laced with guilt. The messages all sounded the same, as if they were reading from a script. Family disagreements happen, sweetheart. You can't just disappear. Your mother is worried sick. Don't be dramatic, Rain. Family comes first. It was textbook manipulation. When one voice couldn't sway me, they multiplied. When guilt didn't work, they tried fear. Harper emailed mutual friends, claiming I was unstable, that I was isolating myself, that my mental health was crumbling. The subtext was clear. If they couldn't control me directly, they'd control how others saw me. But therapy had armed me with clarity. My therapist explained the concept of flying monkeys. When a toxic family recruits outsiders to pressure the scapegoat back into line. Once I recognized it, the manipulation lost its power. I started blocking numbers one by one, my phone growing quieter with every day. Then came the ambushes. Cody appeared in my office parking lot, leaning against my car like an enforcer. His voice rose with self-righteous fury. You're tearing this family apart. Mom barely sleeps. The kids keep asking where Aunt Rain is. I almost laughed at the absurdity. For years I had been excluded, ignored, treated as an afterthought. Now suddenly, my absence was devastating. I looked him straight in the eye and said, I'm not avoiding you. I'm refusing to see you. There's a difference. His face reddened, shame flickering before defensiveness returned. The irony was staggering. They had planned a cruise for 8 months, while telling me to cancel my vacation for their financial needs. Yet they acted betrayed when I drew a boundary. When I pointed this out, Cody's only defense was, You always help out, it's what you do. That sentence sealed everything for me. To them, I wasn't Rain, the daughter, or Rain, the sister. I was Rain, the provider, Rain, the problem solver, Rain, the backup plan. The more I resisted, the more desperate their tactics became. Harper accused me of selfishness. My mother weaponized tears. My father oscillated between anger and cold silence. They weren't trying to understand my pain. They were trying to preserve the system that benefited them. Every call, every voicemail, every guilt trip was designed to drag me back into my old role. But with each, I'm unavailable, I felt stronger. The manipulation that once twisted my heart into knots now sounded hollow. Their tactics hadn't changed. The only thing that changed was me. For the first time, I saw their desperation, not as proof of my importance to the family, but proof of how much they had relied on my silence and compliance. And now, silence and compliance were gone for good. When the pushback didn't pull me back, I knew it was time to change the rules of the game entirely. I wasn't going to keep standing in the line of fire, answering every call, reading every guilt-soaked message. If I was serious about reclaiming my life, I had to build boundaries so strong they couldn't be ignored. The first step was simple, but symbolic. I changed my phone number. When the representative asked if I was experiencing harassment, I paused for only a second before answering, Family. She didn't press. Say no more. She replied. Within an hour, my new number was active. My silence wasn't avoidance anymore. It was protection. Next came the bank account. For years, my parents had access to a joint account we set up when I was in college, originally for emergencies. Looking at the withdrawals, my stomach churned. 17 transactions in the past year alone, none made by me. It wasn't an emergency fund, it was a family convenience fund, fueled by my sacrifices. Closing it felt like reclaiming a stolen piece of myself. I transferred the remaining balance into my personal account and walked out of the bank lighter, freer. Boundaries became my new language. Invitations to family events arrived. Harper's anniversary party, the 4th of July picnic, even a random barbecue I had never missed in 15 years. I mailed back RSVP cards with the same phrase each time. I'm unavailable. No explanations. No excuses. Just a firm declaration of my limits. Emails became the next battleground. I set up an auto-response filter. Thank you for your email. I am currently unavailable. It wasn't just efficiency, it was armor. Every message, no matter how manipulative, received the same flat reply. My inbox turned from a war zone into a quiet stream of automated boundaries. The strangest part was how my breathing changed. Each step gave me a little more air, a little more space inside my own skin. For years, my chest had carried the weight of expectation. Answer the call, send the money, show up even when unwelcome. Now, with every blocked number and closed door, the weight fell away. But boundaries weren't just about shutting them out. They were about opening space for myself. With the money I no longer funneled into their crises, I booked a trip to Barcelona. Gaudia's architecture had fascinated me since I was a teenager. And now, finally, I would see it with my own eyes. This wasn't a revenge trip. It was reclamation, the life I had postponed for too long. When my family tried to twist my boundaries into cruelty, I didn't falter. I knew the truth now. Saying no wasn't punishment. It was survival. And survival, for the first time, looked like freedom. The walls I built weren't prisons. They were protection. For the first time, I wasn't trapped inside their demands. I was standing outside, choosing my own life. The invitation came wrapped in guilt, disguised as civility. Dinner at Bellini's, the same restaurant where we'd once celebrated my college graduation. A family meeting, they called it. My stomach twisted, but I agreed with conditions. This time, I wouldn't go alone. Melissa, my best friend and quiet anchor through all of this, came with me. When the hostess led us to the back corner booth, my heart thudded. There they were, Mom, Dad, Harper, and Cody, lined up like a panel of judges. Their smiles were brittle, their voices rehearsed. Right on time, Mom said, though her eyes betrayed exhaustion. Harper frowned at Melissa's presence, but I didn't budge. I wasn't here to play by their rules. They launched into speeches the moment I sat down. Dad spoke with the measured tone he used for business meetings, reminding me of their past sacrifice. Mom dabbed at invisible tears, recounting how much they had done for me. Harper and Cody alternated between guilt trips and appeals to loyalty. The family isn't the same without you. We need to put this behind us. I listened, silent, letting their words hang in the air. When they finally paused, I placed the manila folder I had brought onto the table. My voice came out steady. May I speak now? Shock flickered across their faces. I had never asked permission before. I opened the folder and spread the first document. A spreadsheet I'd prepared. This is every financial contribution I've made to this family in the past decade. Total $307,842, including the $2,800 for Dad's medical bills. The same week you paid for your Alaska cruise. Mom's hand flew to her throat. But I didn't stop. Next, I laid down a timeline, neatly handwritten. Here are the vacations, holidays, and gatherings I wasn't invited to. Yellow highlights mark the lies I was told. Instead, nearly half the page glowed in neon. Finally, I placed a small photograph on the table. The jewelry-making kit I had begged for at 9 years old. Deemed too expensive at $35. I bought this myself last year. kept it sealed as a reminder. The restaurant had gone quiet around us. Forks paused midair. A waiter lingered, unsure whether to approach. Then I asked the question that cut sharper than any spreadsheet. Name 3 things you've done for me that you didn't also do for Harper or Cody. Just 3. The silence that followed was louder than any shouting match. Dad opened his mouth, closed it. Mom's face crumpled, mascara smudging under genuine tears for the first time. Harper's eyes darted between them, realization dawning. Cody leaned back, expression hard, unable to answer. I gathered the papers, slid one final sheet into the center. My terms: family therapy, financial independence, acknowledgement and apology, time, space. Take time to think about it, I said, rising from the booth. Melissa followed. Behind us, my mother sobbed. My father stumbled over half-hearted comforts. Harper whispered my name. I kept walking. Outside, under the Portland night sky, I breathed easier. For the first time, I hadn't been silent. After the restaurant confrontation, something inside me shifted. I had carried their weight for years, bending under obligations I never asked for, suffocating under guilt they had carefully crafted, but walking out of Bellini's that night, I felt lighter, not because the problem was solved, it wasn't, but because for once, I had spoken my truth without apology. Reclaiming my life wasn't dramatic or flashy. It happened in small, deliberate steps. The first was money. For the first time in years, my paychecks went entirely to me. No late-night transfers, no secret contributions, no guilt-ridden calculations about whether I could afford both groceries and another emergency for them. With every deposit, my savings grew steadily. The numbers in my account weren't just financial progress. They were proof of freedom. I started spending on myself, cautiously at first, like testing shallow water before diving in. The first splurge was a silver pendant I had admired for years. It wasn't extravagant, but when I felt its weight against my collarbone, it grounded me. My therapist called it reclamation, reclaiming the resources and joys that had always been mine to use. She was right. It wasn't about revenge, it was about balance. Next came travel. I booked my ticket to Barcelona, a trip I had postponed countless times for family obligations. I watched videos of Gaudi's Sagrada Familia rising like a stone forest, and for the first time, I believed I would actually stand there myself. This wasn't a dream anymore. It was a promise to myself, one I intended to keep. My apartment transformed too. Beige walls became coral, the color my mother once dismissed as too loud. Abstract art replaced family photos that had felt more like reminders of exclusion than warmth. Each change carved out space that reflected me, not the role they forced me into. My home finally felt like mine. Evenings opened up like never before. With no family emergencies dragging me away, I poured energy into my design portfolio. Projects I had shelved for years came to life, and within months I earned a promotion at work. The timing wasn't luck. It was the result of reclaiming time that once belonged to everyone but me. The greatest shift, though, was emotional. The constant pulse of anxiety that had ruled me, checking my phone, waiting for the next demand, finally faded. When their numbers appeared on my screen, my heart no longer raced. I didn't fear missing out or disappointing anyone. I had stopped confusing self-sacrifice with love. Joy found its way back in small, unexpected ways. Wine nights with Melissa that weren't interrupted by urgent calls. Lunch breaks where I actually enjoyed my food instead of rushing to send money. Quiet mornings with coffee, uninterrupted by guilt. For nearly 3 decades, I gave them everything. Time, money, energy. Now for the first time, I was giving those things to myself. And it didn't feel selfish. It felt necessary. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living for the first time. There was no pressure to show up where I wasn't wanted. No anxiety about gifts I couldn't afford. No gnawing ache from being the outsider in my own family. Instead, I prepared for something new. My first holiday, surrounded by people who actually chose me. The turkey roasted in the oven, the scent of apple pie warming my home. My table wasn't filled with blood relatives, but with people who had stood by me when it mattered. Melissa arrived first, casserole in hand, her husband trailing behind with a bottle of wine. James from work came with his partner Daniel. My neighbor Mrs. Winters brought cookies, still grieving the loss of her husband, but finding comfort in community. Even my therapist, Dr. Warren, now Eleanor outside the office, joined, along with a few members from my boundary support group. We sat around the table, laughter flowing easily, stories spilling out without interruption. No one dismissed anyone else. No one minimized pain or demanded silence. This wasn't family by blood, but by choice. And choice made all the difference. Before we ate, I raised my glass. I want to thank you all for showing me what family can be. My voice didn't tremble. My gratitude wasn't forced. It was real. Later, as I loaded dishes into the washer, Eleanor reminded me of something. 42 sessions. That's how many it took for you to reach this point. She was right. The nightmares had stopped. The guilt had loosened, and the compulsion to check on my parents' finances was gone. I had broken the cycle. Progress was showing on their side too, in small ways. My mother had started therapy. Harper had joined a few sessions, recognizing how she was repeating patterns with her own children. My father still resisted. Cody still clung to entitlement. But change isn't a single event. It's a process. And I no longer felt responsible for carrying all of it. When a cream-colored envelope arrived weeks later, I expected another demand. Instead, I found an invitation to my parents' 40th anniversary, handwritten with care. We'd love to have you, but understand if you prefer not to. Please let us know what works for you. We miss you. No guilt, no assumptions, just words that hinted at growth. I didn't answer right away. For the first time, I allowed myself to pause, to consider what I wanted instead of what they expected. That choice, the space to decide on my own terms, was progress enough. Now my Tuesday evenings belong to the youth center, mentoring young adults, navigating the same kind of wounds I carried. Last week, a 19-year-old named Ashley showed me a toy her parents had promised for years, but never gave. I told her, buy it for yourself. Decide whether to keep it sealed or open it as reclamation. Advice I had finally lived myself. That night, I strung beads from the jewelry kit I once kept sealed. The necklace wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Entirely mine. For the first time in 29 years, I wasn't looking back. I was moving forward toward the life, the love, and the family I chose.